and we had some guy build a macro program in Excel that I had to go through line by line by line to just came up, and she's like, "What are you doing? You've been up here for 3 hours just staring at that computer screen." Back to the roots, I guess, of why we got into the business in the first place, which was really for the freedom that we know land can bring to people. It's just an open opportunity. It's a clean slate to do something that you want to do and applying your own vision. That's really fun. Hey, welcome to the Modern Land Investor Podcast. I'm Michael Warren along with my co-host Chris Clark, and today we're going to be talking about something that I think a lot of people might shy away from, but this is really more to focus on maybe the unglamorous side of land investing. So Chris, where do we start, man? There's a lot of unglamorous things about land investing.
I didn't know that there was anything glamorous about it. So this is probably going to be a pretty long podcast. Can we buckle in for 4 days straight?
Yeah. The glamorous part is like getting the check at the end of the day. Outside of that, man, I don't know if there's anything else really glamorous about it.
Yeah, let's give folks at least some glamour. I mean, you're right. Like we always talk about that, by the way, is just nothing matters until the money is in the bank account. And it's so true. But honestly, everything up until that point is pretty unglamorous. So I think pretty much the whole process is from start to finish. I feel like you're doing a lot of work with data and you're doing a fair amount of research, and the more you can systematize it, the better, obviously, and put people in place that really do well at certain aspects of the business to cover those areas. You can kind of I guess like get away from some of the unglamorous parts of it, but a lot of it is unglamorous. So I mean, for us starting out, we were just like a two-man show at the beginning, so we did every single thing ourselves, right? And then over time we started to kind of like delegate as we learned how to delegate and build SOPs in. So the first thing that is really unglamorous, I would say, is just building a list. Building a list of people that you're going to reach out to.
Yeah, man. And I mean, times have changed a lot, obviously, but I remember so vividly, I was sitting up in this top loft office that I had in my house, and you had sent me over this list, and we had some guy build a macro program in Excel that like scraped together all this data. And then I had to go through line by line by line to just clean up the data and get it to a point to where we were going to send out a mailer, right? Because back then, I mean, we were like $5,000 on a mailer. That was a big deal. And we weren't sure if this was going to work. And so we didn't want to waste any money, save wherever we could. And Carrie came up and she's like, "What are you doing? You've been up here for 3 hours just staring at that computer screen. I think you're looking at the exact same thing you were looking at when I came up here 3 hours ago." But yeah, it's just, it's putting in the hard work there. Obviously things have changed and we figured out ways to be more efficient with that. But I think that really kind of helped build our confidence and our knowledge in just the whole business overall, as we got so involved in every step of the process. I mean, you and I we've done everything in every role in our business. And then we've built an SOP and training around that, and we've hired somebody and delegated it. But we can be called back into that role at any point in time and know exactly how to do that role. And that's just kind of how we came up.
Yeah, and I mean, I think just with the focus on the modern land investor and what's changing, we can talk about some of those ways that you could possibly get rid of some of the stuff that's unglamorous. And I know even for us, we've done a fair amount of automation over the years, far before AI, where we were able to just utilize tools that are built into Excel to make that process a little bit easier. And then of course technology getting better every single year is really helping a lot. So, Carrie coming up and not seeing any difference in the screen, and you're really like, hey, you know what? I'm on row 300. Like I started at row one.
Exactly.
It's not as bad anymore. So,
Exactly.
but it's also kind of it's at a stage where you can't quite trust everything, and one bad row of data, might offset the entire list. So, for us, I mean, we still spot check everything with our own two eyes and just double check that the data is good. Because, like you said, I mean, $5,000 is, I mean, it is still a big deal. Like if you slip up, and you could, screw up an entire list by just having bad data, right? And it's kind of like money flushed down the drain. I think we're not doing blind offers, like we did at the outset as much. So it's a little bit easier in that we're doing a little bit more with the, range offers, neutral letters. And so it helps with not getting everything exactly right. But man, I mean, doing blind offers, especially, when we're coming up on like auctions and we're trying to get ahead of the game there, like it's, you got to get those numbers right. You got to get them perfectly into the spreadsheet so that you don't have a miss row. So unglamorous staring at spreadsheets for sure. And I mean, just even exporting the data and, putting all the filters in and all that kind of stuff is like, kind of mind numbing.
Yeah, and I mean, it is pretty awesome to see how AI and technology have helped eliminate a lot of that redundancy and just or repetitive tasking and taking a lot of the admin work off of your plate. But like you said, there you have to go back and you still need to validate. You need to verify that that information is accurate, and that takes time. I mean, you need to go and QC check your lists. You need to check your data. You need to check inputs from your team. You have to have these QA opportunities in place, these QC checks, so that you can just make sure that the information is accurate.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool. Unglamorous thing number two, due diligence.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, again, I don't want to keep going back into the old days, right? But geez, things have changed dramatically. So with the tools that are out there now and accessibility, being able to know more about a property, figure stuff out much faster, it's gotten better. But whew, we have had many instances, I mean, even still today, where it takes 3, 4, 5 phone calls to an individual contact to verify, validate some information. And it could be just one little detail, but that detail could have such a huge swing in the value of the property, and really effectively could kill the deal, right? So just putting in the work, making the phone calls, doing the research, reading line by line, making sure that you understand everything within the zoning code, everything within the allowable uses, uh, any other kind of gotcha that might come up. Due diligence, man. Due diligence is definitely unglamorous.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, so talking about solutions there, obviously technology helps. One thing that we've always said is trust but verify. And so with technology these days, you get to ask AI questions. And that helps shave off some time and gives you some clues as to what you should be looking for. But it's like, okay, well, trust it to an extent, but verify it, right? But that really came from calling the county, which is still something that we do. There's a bunch of things that we have on our checklist where we need to call the county, call the local, utility providers, and we do a lot of phone inquiries. And then we have to verify a lot of stuff. Like we never just trust the county that, hey, you know what, you can go build something on it, and you can build a 5 bedroom, 3 bathroom house. Yeah, it's you're talking to a person that's a human being, and they might be having a bad day, and maybe they just slipped up and gave you wrong information. So we talked to them. We kind of use that as the first layer of due diligence, but then we also go in and we actually confirm, okay, well, this property is zoned, R1, and with that zoning, we can build a 5 bedroom, 3 bath house. And so it's trust but verify. And I think the nice thing with with AI, it shaves off some of that time, but it's still, you've got to go in and you've got to verify things. And that's just, it's not glamorous. And I don't know when it will get better or when that will go away. Probably at some point, everything will be fully digitized and AI won't hallucinate anymore. And counties won't have, people that even answer the phones at some point. But I don't know if that's next year, 5 years away, or 20 years down the road,
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely at some point in the future. I mean, that's the direction that we're going now, right? With the digitization, the tokenization, and getting everything to be just totally transparent, easily accessible with a click of a button. But yeah, I mean, you're as you were going through the trust but verify, it also reminded me of our, we ask the 5 whys, right? So it's basically if somebody says no or yes or gives us a response, and we don't just take that at face value. And we've been working so hard to train our team members to go deeper, 5 levels, five whys, right? So it's like, oh, like, no, you can't have any livestock on the property. And it's like, oh, why? Like, I thought this was zoned for agricultural and allowed 1 to 2 horses per acre or something. And they're like, oh, well, that may have been the case here. And it's like, oh, like, why? Do you know why that changed or what had happened? And then effectively it just, the person on the other end will realize you're not just going to take an easy answer, and they're either going to pass you off to somebody else that is going to give you the answers that you want, or they're going to spend the time with you to give you all the detail that you need. But that was definitely another kind of shift that we had to make with our team and the mindset and the approach. And it's not glamorous either, right? Just going through and being so detailed and really drilling down to make sure that you understand everything about that property.
And that leads to the other rule of 5. If you can't get the answer from the first person, you gracefully hang up and then try calling back, and hopefully you get someone else. And you've got to sometimes talk to 5 different people to find the right source of truth, So, all right. Unglamorous thing number 3, valuations. You said something to me, because I tend to get frustrated with trying to find the right value, and I'm like a perfectionist, and at some point you were like, hey man, like, valuations is just like an imperfect process in land. It just is. And it's true, because there's not enough comps in a lot of cases, unless you're in an area where there's really a high velocity of sales going on, and that may not happen too frequently in like rural land, but maybe more infill lots or within city limits or something like that. You may see that. I don't know. But historically, there's just not quite enough comps that have enough similar, attributes to come up with a great value, unless you're, full blown appraiser, and it just takes a lot of time. So that leads to a very kind of monotonous process of doing research on these properties and finding comps. And land is so, like, real estate agents a lot of times that are house agents, they'll get a piece of land, they'll put it on the MLS, and they'll leave like all the important information off. They'll just kind of say, hey, here's your dream land, and you can build your amazing dream home on it, and like, let's hope and pray this thing sells, right? But then you're left wondering, okay, well, all right, I see this comp sold, I've got a sold comp, but is it, did it have a well and a septic already installed? Did it already have a, perk test completed, or was it not? Was that something that the buyer did? Was it, was there, I don't know. There's just a million things. Like, was there a fence on it? You have to look in the pictures. The fence might add value. Was there a driveway cut already? Was it totally overgrown? I mean, was it some land that maybe the buyer bought it for timber, and that made the value go up because they were able to timber some of it and then, do whatever they were going to do with the rest of the land? And there's just so many things that you've got to factor in when you're doing valuations, that you just got to sit there and be willing to take notes on all of the comps, dig up all the comps, which is a whole nother story in and of itself. It's like Redfin sometimes will not have comps that Zillow has, and vice versa. A lot of times they do, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes there's just different comps. or it may just be a location issue, which is the next thing. A lot of land is like, listed as 0 Main Street. And so Zillow or Redfin, if they don't have GPS coordinates or some way to tell where that location is of the property, they might put it miles away from the actual location. So you really got to be willing to dig deep to get the value of properties.
Yeah, and I mean, it also goes back to just being imperfect. The definition of value is what somebody is willing to pay for it at that point in time, right? And that's always an unknown. Somebody could have a reason to pay a certain price for a property, and then that skews the comps, that skews the entire market. Somebody came in and they really wanted this property for one particular reason, or they had some sort of life event, or they're in some sort of financial situation where they were able to pay what they were able to pay, or a seller was willing to sell for whatever they sold it for. And that is hard to pierce through and really analyze to see, okay, is that an outlier? Is that really resetting the market now? Is that something that we need to pay attention to, or kind of read between the lines and then put our experience into play to understand, okay, we think that, that's something that we're going to consider, but we're not going to put as much weight to, and then we got to reassess the value accordingly. It is tedious, like you said. It's definitely an art. Appraisers, obviously, licensed appraisers go through tons of education, and they go through hours and hours and hours of training, and then they go out and do appraisals, and it's still totally subjective. And so it's a lot of work to try and justify whatever value it is that you've come up with, but it is just that. It's imperfect, it's subjective. So you just got to do the best that you can, but it's not a glorious process either.
No, and I mean, we don't get a lot of appraisals because, I mean, for that exact reason, and we don't get a lot of bank financing, so we don't need appraisals. But I mean, we've had appraisals over the years, and it's almost laughable. It's like, wow, how did you even come up with that? Like, yeah, I see the comps, but I don't know if that values, I don't know if that's how I would value it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember that one property that we were looking at out in California, and there was there was like a movie production studio that was put in on one of the adjacent properties. And so the appraiser came in and used that land comp. And it was not a big property, but they were valuing it at something like $4 or $5 million, just based on that land comp next door. And we're looking at some of the comps around the area, and we're like, man, I don't even know how we can get to six figures, much less $4 or $5 million. And I mean, here's this, 25-page appraisal report that's written by this professional appraisal company. And it's like, man, we just can't get behind this. And then of course it blew up the whole deal because the sellers just had this inflated value in their mind now from a licensed appraiser. They probably still own the property today.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. All right. So there's a few unglamorous things. What's rattling around in your mind as an unglamorous area of the land business?
I think it's putting in the hard work of following up with sellers and following up with buyers, just the overall follow up, right? And people, sometimes it takes people a while to make a decision, and the sales numbers, either on acquisitions or on the disposition sales side, it's always a numbers game, and it's always a follow up, and it's always timing. And man, it is just inglorious to sit there and be consistent and hit the phones and do your follow-ups and be there when the time is right, whether you're acquiring a property or whether you're trying to sell a property. And so just putting in that work, consistency, man, that is really tough and underappreciated. But the people who are really good, they know that that's where the money comes, is in the follow-up.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that I feel like, 90% of the success in in the land game is just based on that consistency, right? Like consistency in outreach and consistency in follow up. And all you have to do is, you know, be a nice person to talk to, and you don't have to be some amazing salesperson in most cases. It's more so about just being there and being top of mind. And, um, you know, when that person's ready, like you said, a lot of it is timing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's funny how many people we've talked to who have gotten into the land space and they've gotten in for whatever reason they wanted to, generate some passive income, or it started as a side hustle, or they wanted the freedom, and they had this fear of success because they didn't associate themselves as a salesperson. And it's like, you know what, just be yourself. And people, that's what's going to attract people. People will want to work with people that they like you said. And nobody really wants to work with an overly pushy or super flashy salesperson. They want to just work with somebody who's real. And so some of the people that we know of in the business who have had the most success, I would not peg as a salesperson at all. Right. But they come out and they're just very transparent. They say who they are, and this is my story, and I'm going to be very honest and upfront with you. And this is what I can pay, or, this is why I'm selling the property for what I'm selling it for. And if, you like me and trust me, then, we can work out a deal. And they have tremendous success.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree with that. So next unglamorous thing that's coming to mind since you just said the word deal is contracts.
Yeah, contracts. Oof. I think in the land game, for a long time, we have gotten away with, just having a very simple standardized contract. And we got away from that for a little while, and we started to add some complexity into our contracts, and some different layers of protection. And, the pendulum continues to move back and forth, right? Where we went too far to one side, where we probably introduced too much legalese and language in there. And we recognized that it turned some people off. And so we kind of went back to the simplicity. Now, all of what we had done, we've been very um, intentional about working with an attorney to make sure that we get all of the language approved. And they've been really good with us about helping us to just identify the risks associated with putting language in or taking language out. And so we've definitely gotten burned on both sides, right? Where we've had people who will sign a contract and then just walk away, and we don't have enough teeth in the contract to enforce anything. And we've kind of just wasted time and money and effort on trying to get the deal across the finish line. But on the other side, we've definitely lost deals because we overcomplicated things. And it's like they just want to work with somebody who they know and trust, and they know can get the deal done. And I mean, that would be just as effective with a handshake in their eyes as opposed to signing a 10-page contract. So working through the contracts, that's definitely unglamorous, but it is one of the things that you just got to continue to play with, and make sure that it matches your style, it matches your comfort level with the risk. And it's really kind of I think it's really kind of a way to present, your culture of who you are to a client, a customer, a buyer, a third party, just with a single document. It tells a lot about the type of business that you do, and how you do it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And just going back to some of the ways that we've handled contracts over the years, we had very, very simple contracts at the beginning, and then we went way too far. But I think one thing that has been nice is as we've sort of landed on like standard templates. I mean, I don't think we have that many at this point, probably like 6 or 8. But as we've got these standard templates, and I'm just talking about on the disposition side of the business. We've got contract for a cash sale, a contract for a term sale, and then we have various versions depending on the type of transaction that it is. So once we kind of have like the boilerplate contract down, there's not a lot that we're going to kind of put in there or take out based on a deal. A lot of it is pretty standard, and it's not too off-putting, I think, for a buyer. I would say, more so where we spend a lot of time on contract changes is on the acquisition side. And so, we've had the experience of just like a very, very simple acquisition contract, right? And then we kind of went overboard because we got burned and put in a bunch of stuff that was like, hey, you know what? If you back out of this deal, you owe me your firstborn child. And it was like too crazy. And then, okay, it's like, all right, what's the middle ground here that gives us some protection so that if we do, have a contract with someone, we do hold up our end of the bargain and we go and we spend money and we do due diligence and all that kind of stuff. They can't just simply walk away. And I think finding that balance on the acquisition side is, it took us a while, but now we've got a good contract that we're happy with. And if we need to redline it, we can, but it's usually not an issue. I would say in our previous career, I don't know how much you dealt with this necessarily, but I was pretty focused on acquisitions, leasing, and sales of commercial properties. And I literally felt like I was an attorney, 7 out of the 8 hours of the day sometimes, because I would just sit there either redlining the letter of intent myself or sitting on a call with the other party and then an attorney or both attorneys, and just literally like talking about it while the attorneys are trying to actually document the conversation. And it was nuts. And I will say maybe there is a glamorous side of the land business, is that you don't have to do that quite as much.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I do remember back in the development days, we had so many different contracts for different things, but I mean, it even started with a letter of intent, right? And then you add language in there that was binding, and then language that was non-binding, and then moving from the letter of intent to the contract, or if you were working with an RFP, a request for proposal, and you had to submit certain documentation, it gets pretty complex pretty quickly. But that all kind of circling back into the land space, and you were mentioning the different templates that we have. I think that it's also really important to understand, it is appropriate to have different templates for different types of deals at different thresholds or different dollar amounts, right? So we definitely have a contract that we are very comfortable with for deals that are sub $20,000, right? And that's because we're willing to take a little bit more risk, and that's a little bit more of a simplified contract that may not have as much teeth in it. And we know that we're going to have some of those that walk away and people may violate the terms of the contract, and we really don't have much recourse. But that's okay. That's a risk that we're willing to take because we feel like the simplicity helps us to get deals done, more deals done in that pricing band. Then when we move up from $20,000 plus to $100,000 type properties, we have a much more formalized contract that has much more teeth and a lot more restrictions and a lot more protections in place for both the buyer and the seller. And that's also a little bit more widely accepted because that becomes kind of industry standard. And then different types of deals where you have maybe an entitlement deal where you're kind of cutting up some pieces, or a deal that you need to rezone, or even a value add deal where you're going to be going in and you're going to be doing some improvements, and you can build out longer due diligence periods. You can build out longer contingency periods, different types of contingencies within the contract. So, man, it is definitely one of those things that it pays to reach out to somebody who has some experience as you get into those deals. Ask, how they've been able to navigate through some of those things, get some guidance from them, work with your attorney, make sure you're comfortable with the contracts that you're pushing through. And again, that's kind of the tedious work of just educating yourself, going through the motion, going through the process, learning what works, what doesn't work, and a lot of trial and error.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well said. All right. Well, I've got one more thing that I can think about that's unglamorous, but I want to like kind of end on that. And we don't want to make an hour long episode of things that aren't glamorous because just people will never invest in land. But but before mine, I mean, what else do you got on your in your mind that's coming to mind that's unglamorous?
I think it'll probably be the same one that you've got. But I would, well, I'll get there. So why don't you just throw it out there, and then maybe we'll circle back on a lighter note of some of the other things that are positive takeaways from this.
Well, yeah, I don't know if it will be the same thing because it's more personal, right? And I think some people will think this is really glamorous. What I'll say because it was glamorous to me at the beginning. It was part of the reason that I really wanted to get into land. But the thing that's unglamorous is that you can do it all virtually for the most part, you know. And so I find myself being just a keyboard warrior, right? Like I don't have a sense of accomplishment where I have gone out and done something aside from like clicking the keyboard and like pushing paper virtually. And so, but getting into it, like when I was first kind of begging you to come work with me, one of my things was, hey, we can do all this virtually, but we can't push all the paper. And like my dream is I want to go travel around the world. So the beauty is we can do most of this virtually, but like someone's got to be around and like actually get documents notarized and do some of that kind of stuff. And you were like, yeah, okay. Like I can do that because I'm a little bit more settled. We've bought a house, we're married, like we're gonna start a family. You're like, I'm not planning on going and traveling around the world living out of a backpack. So this is a good marriage between us, right? And then and then that actually dream came true, and I got to go travel around, and it was really neat in that respect. But there's a lot of times where I'm like, man, I want to go walk around on the land, or I want to stick a shovel in the ground or something, and feel like there's a little bit more of getting from point A to point B or accomplishing something other than just virtually pushing paper around the internet.
Yeah, it's a funny, because I was gonna say on the lighter notes of like some of the things that we could do that are maybe a little bit more glamorous would be doing just that, like actually getting out of the office, getting out to go visit the properties, going to check out some of these areas. And it was funny as we were starting the business and we were buying properties in these areas that we had never traveled to. We're buying these properties sight unseen, and it was kind of uncomfortable at first because it's like, man, I feel like we really need to be getting out there. And we did. We took some trips. We went out, we looked at the properties, we were checking out the access, we were checking out all the utilities surrounding areas, and just trying to get a better feel for the market. And we got away from that as we scaled, because we scaled really rapidly, right? I mean, we ended up going into 35 states and over 125 counties, right? And it was like, we're not going to, it's not feasible for us to go out and check out all these areas. But there was a point when I vividly remember when you and I sat back and we were like, man, we got to get back to doing that. We got to get out there. And we took that trip out to that property in Wyoming, and we kind of took a little extra time, and that was fun. That was something that I think kind of gave us a little bit of a rejuvenation to get back out there and check out some of the properties and get down back to the roots, I guess, of why we got into the business in the first place, which was really for the freedom that we know land can bring to people. It's just an open opportunity. It's a clean slate to do something that you want to do, and getting out there and actually getting on the property and applying your own vision. That's really fun.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we have made an effort to do that, but you don't have to do it, and that's where it gets a little monotonous, and you're just doing it virtually in the office. And now both work from home, and so it's even more kind of like you're a solo person sitting there pushing paper around the internet. But you're right. Like at the beginning, we did go visit a bunch of properties. Then we kind of stopped. Then we went out. We did the Wyoming property, and we went and shot guns. And it was like a 320-acre parcel. It was the biggest property we bought at the time, and it was amazing. That was a lot of fun. Then we didn't go to properties for a while. Then I think we went up to some properties in Colorado. Then we didn't go to properties for a while. Then we did the road trip in 2020 2020, I guess. Yeah, this was COVID era. And we went all over the place, in your RV, and did a massive, adventure, which we should unpack someday on a podcast, which was totally crazy. Uh, and, uh, and then I'm trying to think if we did a bunch of property visits after that. But the problem is, you really can't, like, you can't afford to go if you're doing it, at scale and it's not local. You can't go hop a plane or drive an RV all over these properties all the time. If it's local, for sure. But if you're doing it like we do, you tend to go into states and areas that are just not right in your own backyard. So it doesn't make it financially feasible.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the glorious part of it, right? And some of the other things that really have brought some opportunity and enjoyment to us through the land business.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. We shouldn't leave everybody with just straight unglamorous notes about the land business.
Yeah, but
What are you thinking?
it is important though, right? And I think it speaks to, who you and I are, and as our audience, are the listeners. Like, we're not here to just hype up the land business as the best thing ever. That's, the easiest investment play where you can just come in and you can just make a ton of money. It is work, and there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. Anybody that's in the business will tell you it's not easy, right? It's definitely, it can be amazing, and it can create unbelievable opportunity. And if you really do enjoy land and real estate, and you're after generating, some passive income, whether you're building out a note portfolio or some cash flow, if you're looking to flip properties or wholesale properties or develop properties, it can really open some doors for you, right? But it is not easy. Otherwise, everybody would be doing it. There'd be no margin in it, and um, we wouldn't be in business. So yeah, I think, you had hit on one of the things kind of in a different angle, when you were talking about being the keyboard warrior and kind of just the monotony of doing deal after deal. And, it took me back when I was in development, and, when we did the renovation project on our house. And I really like to do projects where I can start a project and finish a project and feel that sense of completion. And that's kind of a sense of accomplishment, right? And then that gives me that dopamine hit. And then I move on to the next thing. And with land, as we were growing and scaling and we were doing deals, I was getting that initially, right? When it's like, okay, great. Like, did a deal. But then without doing a lot to the deal, I didn't feel as much of that sense of accomplishment. It just became, all right, that was one deal down. Now we've got, 49 more to go before we hit our goal for this month. And so, that being said, I think where we were able to really connect with some of the sellers and some of the buyers that we worked with, and really felt like we were able to provide value to them in whatever their situation was, and they really appreciated and respected the way that we did business. That was just as good, right, as like physically completing a project. Knowing that we were able to help somebody in a situation like that, there's no better feeling than you walk away and you know that it's a win-win situation. You help somebody, whether it's, a seller who needs to get out of a situation or just doesn't want to deal with something, or it's a buyer who didn't know that they would have the opportunity that they have, and you kind of made that a reality for them, and you're able to connect on that personal level. I mean, I just, that's kind of what keeps you coming back again and again.
Yeah, yeah, and I will say, like, a lot of the things that that you just said, I've felt that a lot, where we've helped someone, whether it's a buyer or a seller, and that is a tangible feeling, So you can be sitting there in your office, but once you've done that, you can actually say, okay, look, I mean, I've created an opportunity, or I've accomplished something that's special for someone else, So that feels good. There's a lot of things that we just rattled off that are kind of monotonous, and they are maybe unglamorous, but they do all create opportunities. And I think one of the things that I would say is glamorous is I think you and I are very much operators, and we think in systems. And so while all these things are very much not glamorous on their own, like when you can orchestrate them all and create a system that runs fluidly, and you can really push volume through like the factory, if you will, then that is glamorous. So that is a huge, sense of, that gives us, I think, a huge sense of accomplishment. So that's fun. I mean, once we started to get, I mean, this is years into the business, and we probably could have done it faster if we really focused, right? But there were points where, the land that was kind of passing through the factory, getting purchased and getting sold, was stuff that you and I had never even seen, didn't even really know about, right? Like, and, but it worked. Like the team did it. They went through the checklist, went through their SOPs, and followed the procedures to get the land bought and sold. And we were able to make a profit on it. So, that is, I think, like, that is glamorous, at least to us,
Yeah, I agree. And to that point too, I think, kind of an unglamorous thing is as you're growing and scaling, it's to putting in the work to recruit and hire and train a team of people that fit in your culture. And there's so much work that goes on there where you're going through the interviews, and you're probably going to make some mistakes with the hires that you make, and then spending all the time and training them and creating processes, and then going back and revising the process, and retraining people. And that is unglamorous for sure. But the reward at the end is seeing the team succeed and achieve their goals. And you know that you have provided them with that opportunity to make money for them, for their families, to achieve their goals, their ambitions. And that is also incredibly rewarding, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, man. What else? Anything else that's unglamorous or glamorous that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, I think the last thing that I'll touch on is I thought, I'll speak for myself, I thought for a long time the glamour was um in at the finish line, when you've got the deal done, you've got the money in the bank, and you feel amazing, like you just hit a milestone, or you've just sold a property, and you just finished a deal, right? And that definitely was some of the glamour up front, or in the beginning, when we were starting the business, and we felt really good every time you finished out that deal. But then as we were scaling and growing, that seemed to kind of fade, right? And that wasn't the real glamour that we were going for, and or it wasn't, at least what I wanted to take away from it. That wasn't my why really at the end. And that's kind of something that took a long time for me to figure out. Was I'm not here, obviously we are here to make a living and do well and provide for our families and provide for our team. But just that single deal win at the end of the day, it wasn't what we were chasing. It was really the journey, the process all along the way. And that includes all the unglamorous things that took place, because when you struggle, when you go through all the pain and suffering and blood, sweat, and tears of doing all of the unglamorous things, and you get to the finish line, that going back and reflecting on that journey with your team and with your business partner, that at the end of the day, you realize was the glamour that you were chasing all along, was the journey itself.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it still is.
Yeah.
I can't
Never
believe we
ending.
didn't. I can't believe we didn't talk about bookkeeping. That's pretty unglamorous.
That's just so painful. We just don't even want to talk about it. We just
I think
push it off to the side.
we
Find a
blocked
good
that out.
bookkeeper. Find a good bookkeeper,
Yes.
and that'll help you significantly.
Oh man, yeah. Set up your chart of accounts the right way and find a good bookkeeper, and just do that right off the bat, and your life will be a lot easier.
Well worth whatever you're going to pay them.